is this is a timely topic with the upcoming Outdoor Recreation Summit in June. And, after all the work of the Redwood Rise whole endeavor and with the focus on regionality, I can think of few better topics than the Great Redwood Trail, which really exemplifies cross-jurisdictional opportunity and I'll say it, some challenge. And with I've had some direct experience in my professional life working on trail projects, and there's just something so exciting about putting them together and seeing them come to life. They're complex planning processes, finance, big time finance questions, and then with the sort of end goal, the ideal of these wonderful facilities that allow for, active transportation in communities and access to landscape and recreation. I mean, it's just so many things wrapped up into what these are. And so we're so lucky to have Elaine Hogan, who probably many of you know, and then Bridget, who I've just come to see here for the first time, but I think you have a new job, and so we're looking forward to meeting you. And and the folks here, are all interested in economic development, funding and economic development generally, been part of the Redwood Region Rise activity, and funding and finance has been, the focus of this work group. So topics that touch on some of those uh, you know, dynamics in relationship to the trail, as well as um, opportunities. I think, those are ways that communities and groups can think about the trail as an opportunity for near, mid, and long-term economic development and and even thinking about a little bit on how the Great Redwood Trail Agency thinks about its role in economic development, I think would be timely. And then once Elaine uh, does her thing, for the latter half of the session today, we're going to be joined by Sean Casey White, who's the executive director for the Vine Trail, which runs from Vallejo up through Calistoga and offers another take on um, trail as an economic development engine for another part of our state. So I think with that as my preamble, I'll pass it over to you, Elaine, and we can go from there. And as you know, this is recorded, and we save this for posterity and post these on our website for other folks to see.
All right, great. Well, thanks very much for that introduction. Are you all just seeing the full screen of the presentation? Perfect, perfect. Great. So thank you for that wonderful welcome. I'm Elaine Hogan. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Redwood Trail Agency, and I am joined with my colleague Bridget Nichols, who's recently been promoted from the Operations Manager to our Deputy Director. So we are a small agency, but growing. We currently have 6 employees, and we'll be growing to about 15 in the next year. So great. So as you all may or may not know, the Great Redwood Trail is a non-motorized trail envisioned on the former railroad corridor from San Francisco Bay to Humboldt Bay. And so our northern segment here in Humboldt and Mendocino counties is Great Redwood Trail Agency's area specifically. And so there's about 231 miles that we cover. The southern segment is a rail with trail that SMART, the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit, will design and build out alongside their active freight and passenger train service. So the whole trail serves 5 counties because it includes Sonoma and Marin County as well, all the way down to the Golden Gate Bridge. And we've got about 47 miles of trail that are already open out of the 307. Great. So, GRTA is a state-created public agency. So we are the successor agency to the North Coast Railroad Authority. And that is a huge benefit in that we inherited all the land of the railroad. So a lot of long distance trail projects have the unique challenge of acquiring land. And we, in this case, have secured the entire right of way and own and manage it. And so that is a huge benefit to this project. One thing, there are still definitely many challenges, but that is one thing at least that we can cross off the list. And the area north of Willits is what we call rail banked, and so it is not considered an active railroad, which allows us to build trail directly where the railroad tracks once were. So yeah, we have a board of directors representing all of the counties. We also have one city representative, and that's our governing body. And we exist to plan, design, construct, operate, and maintain the Great Redwood Trail along the former railroad right-of-way. And a key part of the project is the restoration and environmental protection component. So again, we're shifting from this legacy of industrial, heavy commercial industrial use with the railroad into restoring that environment and protecting the environment moving forward, cleaning up that legacy of contamination and railroad debris that has been left behind for the past several decades since the railroad ceased operation. And so the Great Redwood Trail, in part, is a public solution to that environmental restoration. So restoration is a huge component of the project that's really built into all aspects of both how we manage our property when it's not yet a trail and how we think about trail development and the opportunities for restoration as we build. In terms of connecting communities across the region, we've got about 29 towns across 3 counties in the 231-mile service area for GRTA. And so really a huge capacity to impact those communities in a positive way through the development of this infrastructure project. So yeah, it's really meant to be a world-class rail to trail project. So these long distance trails really connect various landscapes. As you can see here, we go from old growth redwood forests into the Eel River Canyon. One of America's most scenic rail corridors is the former Northwestern Pacific Rail Line. We've got oak woodlands and vineyards, small farms along the way. And then we get to Humboldt Bay, which is a nice coastal estuary habitat. So really a variety of landscapes that the trail passes through. And we're really looking to accommodate a variety of trail users. And so everyone from wheelchair users and backpackers to equestrians and cyclists, kayakers, hikers, runners, really all of the non-motorized ways that you can recreate. Just to give you a kind of glimpse of some of those different trail types, we've got mainly 3 different trail types that are envisioned. One is the paved multi-use trail, mostly used more in urban areas to connect people with shopping and work and active transportation opportunities. And so this is what you'll see, for example, around Humboldt Bay that connects Arcata and Eureka. That is part of the Great Redwood Trail. And we have those 2 large population centers in Humboldt now linked through the Bay Trail portion of the Great Redwood Trail. So that's an example there that many of you may have seen. When we get into the transition area, kind of between that paved and the backcountry, we move to a crushed stone multi-use trail. So that's a natural surface trail, and we have those envisioned. You can kind of see in between some of our population centers. And then we move into a backcountry trail, which is really, pretty minimal impact in terms of what's in the backcountry area right now, which is a railroad with a lot of debris left behind from those rail industrial uses. So looking to restore that and just have a pretty narrow walking path that's dirt and natural surface. Trails really touch all aspects of society, which is part of the challenge and I think part of the excitement as well around trail development. So we have an opportunity. Probably what's most helpful for this group to understand is more about this sort of trail towns model, where there's really opportunities in all those little 29 towns that I mentioned on the previous slide for trail-oriented development, and to really be centered around, the people that are coming in and locals as well, that are walking and biking to get to various destinations. So looking at how businesses can adapt, how they can put bike racks up, how they can attract that investment in these small communities, some of which since the decline of the railroad have basically been abandoned. You saw development shift from where the rail line was to the highway, and now looking to shift that back into those small towns that were along the former railroad. So you have opportunities to connect the trail to existing local businesses and various amenities that people using the trail are really going to want. So it's also an active transportation corridor, providing green infrastructure, sustainable active transportation. I mentioned the environmental restoration component, really restoring those ecosystems where the railroad had disrupted habitat. And also important to note, the railroad was built at a time when our environmental protection standards were not where they are today, and the railroad just a great opportunity for restoration, and certainly a lot of potential there. Looking at the reestablishment of a wildlife corridor, native vegetation and habitat that supports wildlife. So really great opportunity there as well, and to create new recreation opportunities. So we have part of the Great Redwood Trail along the Eel River, and also along the Van Duzen. And so really opportunities to create new river access points that are an exciting part of this project. Backcountry campgrounds also are planned every 8 to 10 miles in the backcountry areas. And, how can we leverage this infrastructure project to bring more funding for public safety and strengthen our fire and first responder capacity, especially in those rural areas? So lots of opportunities. Our economic benefits assessment, which you can find on our website and in our master plan as an appendix, was completed based on 2023 dollars, so a little outdated, but estimated a total of over $100 million in annual benefits to communities along the trail once it is fully built, and you get the benefit of those long distance hikers that are staying longer, spending more money on their trips as they traverse the trail. So most of that comes from recreation, tourism, and retail benefits. So, anyone who's ever done any long distance trails knows that it's not cheap. You're buying gear and equipment, and you're getting prepared. You got to eat every day. You're staying somewhere. Maybe you want a shuttle service that's going to carry your backpack from point A to point B. So kind of a lot of services develop around this whole recreation economy and this idea that we're creating here. You also see health benefits and savings there. And so, about 37% of this money comes from that, and looking at the preventative aspects and reduction in mortality that comes from more active transportation when people live closer to trails and have opportunities for physical activity regularly. And about $2.5 million on reduction in collisions and reduction in emissions. And then, we're looking at over $5 million in annual tax revenue for our local jurisdictions. So that mainly comes from our transient occupancy tax and sales taxes. So the cities and the counties do stand to benefit significantly for this. And it's a question of how they invest that. How do we capture that data? How do we tell that story about the money that is coming into communities as a result of this infrastructure investment? And how does that get put back into supporting both the small businesses that support the trail, as well as into trail maintenance and trail development of amenities themselves? So really a great opportunity there. Yeah, so just kind of breaking down a little bit of the recreation, tourism, and retail benefits that I mentioned before. We have estimated, between 6 and 9 million annual trips on the completed trail. And so that seems really large. And I just want to clarify that that includes just like little short trips that you might take walking your dog on the trail every day. So we're not necessarily talking about, bringing in 6 to 9 million individual people that are going to traverse the trail each year. It's really meant to be just any trip on the trail. So I live in Blue Lake. I walk to the post office on the trail. it's just a little 5-minute walk that will count as a trip. So just to clarify how we're getting that metric. And about a third of the visitors are, a third of the trips are expected to be from non-local visitors. And so that's really where we're going to see more of the economic benefits, because they're going to need lodging and things like that you wouldn't need if you lived here locally. So again, just a visual breakdown here of the spending that we expect to see in various sectors of the economy. So mostly in lodging and food and meals, and a little bit in retail, entertainment, and things like gear rentals, bicycle rentals. Those health and transportation benefits, like I mentioned before, reduction in healthcare costs for the entire region, which, you know, healthcare is certainly a challenge for us here in rural Northern California. And so there are benefits that can be realized for our healthcare system, as well as transportation, like I mentioned, reduction in collisions and vehicle miles traveled and congestion on our rural roads. Just a little breakdown by county. Most of the mileage is in Humboldt County. And so, yeah, you can see the numbers kind of reflected here, very similar to Mendocino County. Trinity County is a very rural area where the trail passes through in the Eel River Canyon, and there's only about 12 miles of trail there. So smaller numbers for them. But yeah, you can kind of see the breakdown here. And great, in terms of project prioritization, we look at the overall trail, the 231 miles in our master plan, which was just adopted in March of this year. We really have a tiered approach to dividing up the whole 231 miles into 43 trail segments, so we can kind of take off pieces at a time, and we've arranged them into tiers based on their prioritization, based on their impact and feasibility to the local community. And so it really gives us an approach where we can start timelining out trail development and start looking at where we should focus first to get that maximum benefit to our local communities. So we have that now adopted with the master plan. There is a segment map for each of these segments. So you can always see that in the appendix of our master plan and check out the area that you're most excited about, and start thinking about which tier it's in, and really see where we're getting that data and how we're imagining building this thing out. So yeah, just a sample of some of the tier 1 priority projects. There are 16 of them in the master plan. Some of these are already in active planning and are being worked on. Others we will be planning to start working on next fiscal year, starting in July. And so with the adoption of our budget at our May board meeting in just a couple of weeks, we'll be presenting several of these to move forward with our next round of funding. We did receive about $50 million in Prop 4 funding that we will be utilizing to move some of these tier 1 priority segments forward in the next year. So that's really exciting. So currently, just to go over really quickly, some of our key milestones here. We were created in 2021. We officially started operating in 2022. We just released our draft master plan in 2024, and it was finally adopted in March. And so we've got 47 miles open to the public, and now we have this tiered plan for developing out the rest of the trail. In terms of our funding strategy, like I mentioned, our main source of funding right now did come from the climate bond. We have about $50 million that needs to get out the door into some projects here in the next couple of years. For our operations, we do have some direct allocations from the state legislature over the next couple of years. Our main source of ongoing funding is our license and lease revenue from the private use of our property. And so it's sort of the same model as the railroad companies used to have. Land is their biggest asset. And so, you know, if we rent out space to a business, or if people have a road crossing, or a utility company wants to put in fiber optics, or PG&E for power lines, those are things that we charge for, and that is our source of ongoing revenue for our operations. Aside from that, we have competitive grant funding that we have looked to and will be definitely looking towards to more heavily in the future as we spend down our climate bond funding and our state allocations. So we are a state created public agency. We do not have the benefit of cities like cities and counties do to levy taxes or to propose ballot measures. And so we do not have the same sources of revenue as cities and counties do. So we really look to them to partner on these efforts and really look to tell the story about how the project benefits their local jurisdictions so that we can keep the project moving and also keep it maintained over time. And that's it. So thank you all very much and happy to take questions whenever that's appropriate. I don't know if the Vine Trail is going to go next or if you want to take questions now.
I think now's a good time to take some few questions. Sean Casey White is here, but I think we have time for a few questions. So I put one in the chat when you were on the topic, but if there's anyone else who has a question before that, feel free to chime in, raise your hand. Okay, not seeing any. The one I put in here was just on the topic of trail-oriented development. Do you know if that's viewed similarly to transit-oriented development in terms of its sort of beneficial positioning for permitting and other compliance matters and possibly even financing matters? Like if a community is interested in trail-oriented development, does that confer any unique benefits to the developer? Have you heard anything about that?
I feel like Bridget might be able to touch on this one.
Yeah, so part of our funding strategy is coming from the Prop 4 funding. It does give us CEQA exemptions. It does not exempt us from permitting with, coastal conservancy or coastal commission, or things like CDFW, things of that nature. It does open us up for funding for active transportation. We are motorless, so none of the ATV funding type of, there's lots of trail development funding that goes to ATVs, but we aren't eligible. We aren't doing that in our area.
Right.
But yeah, it opens up for a lot of different federal funding structures as well. Right now, there's not as many opportunities as there has been in other administrations for that kind of stuff. But if it is federal funding, then it usually puts us under the NEPA permitting requirements for constructions as well. So while we might have a CEQA exemption, we do still have to follow NEPA for federal funding. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah. I was thinking more, I guess, for like the cities, and I'm going to look to Craig Schlatter from Ukiah to chime in here. But like, if a city it has or a jurisdiction has property or even a private developer that's adjacent to like a transit hub or something like that, then that they're getting, a little bit higher value. They can access different funding streams and even I think there are some CEQA exemptions and things that have been approved in recent years to facilitate, the kind of more dense development around transit centers. And it just occurred to me that like, is there any benefit that someone could say, hey, I'm doing a trail-oriented development and then be able to access those same benefits? Craig, do you have anything to say from the city perspective?
No, I think, well, on the TOD stuff, I think it's primarily it's kind of like coming from the standpoint of reduction of VMT, and GHG. So there, I think the
Vehicle
state looks
miles traveled.
right. So I think that they kind of look at it as like, how do we, reduce car trips. And so, like TOD, they have the incentive for like housing, for example, located within a half mile of a transit center, as an example to like cut down on the number of cars. But I haven't heard of anything for trails because it's active transportation, it's not. I think that's really what they're trying to encourage is more active transportation and less vehicles. But I haven't heard anything, so I mean, I would defer to Lane or Bridget in, if they've heard anything on that.
Yeah, so to be determined there, but it it might be a mechanism to explore because if you get certain benefits for doing development near the trail as a way to reduce vehicle miles traveled, I would think that might be useful. I see Kathy entered a few questions. Maybe we'll take these for a few more minutes, and then John, if you're okay, we'll bring you in just a moment here. What is the estimated timeline to completion?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we don't have that at this point. So what we do have is priority segments, and it's really going to depend on funding and our capacity. So if you're in a tier 3 segment, for example, we may not start for another 10 or 15 years. It's really too far out to have a more specific timeline than that. If you're in tier 1, we may start working on it as we may already be working on it, or we may start working on it within the next, 2 to 5 years, 2 to 7 years. So the prioritization kind of gives you a rough timeline, but we don't have a full timeline because we don't have funding secured for the entire project. And mileage within each tier can be found in our prioritization table in the master plan. And electric
those
assisted.
vary between like 4 to 12 miles, and a lot of times they're either natural terminuses of kind of like where it really transitions from more of a city central location to more of a rural area. So they vary based on kind of natural endpoints and entrance points for the trail. So just in case you're wondering why that they vary so much.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, electric assisted bikes on the trail, that is another user group. So we'll need to develop policies and community practices around managing that type of trail use. So that's going to be more on the urban trails, the paved trails. But yeah, definitely another user group.
So lots of user group dynamics to work out.
One fun thing is we do have our upcoming May board meeting. We'll be presenting how we're utilizing that funding or how we're planning to utilize that funding to move into some of those initial tier 1s. So May 21st, Elaine, I think, right? So
yep, Thursday the 21st.
Yeah. So we should have some exciting information coming out around that time. And then as far as like other economic development opportunities, this is the trail is kind of a backbone for a lot of that, and thinking of things like adjacent landowners really have a lot of opportunities for glamping, for horseback riding, for farm to tables, for kind of offshooting for businesses. So we're also looking in potential concessionaires for some of our larger land spaces where people might be the campground hosts and things like that. So it is kind of up to the community's imagination and how we're really showing the strengths and the assets of our regions, and how we can build that even further beyond just what is currently existing as trail revenue.
Great. See, Thomas.
I already know what Thomas's question is going to be. Go ahead.
You know what? You may know, but you also probably aren't expecting. Just
Okay.
gratitude among Lane and team. Huge project, huge heavy lift. I always take convincing before I endorse anything, and it didn't take much time or long to be convinced of this effort and the team behind it. And so grateful for the time invested. I can personally just share in Lolita. We started asking questions from the beginning and continued to seek and gain engagement and partnership and support and MOUs, you name it. So as far as economic development is concerned and connection with this team, I'm continuing to look forward to doing that work. but also just to mention to the rest of our colleagues here that this is also your call to be challenged by me, is that if there's anything to do nearby or close or in conjunction with the trail, jump on board now. This is the opportunity to get your voice and also to be able to participate in some of the decision-making practices that shape everything in this trail. And I'm grateful to have been a part of the guinea pigging in the early stages of that process. But the one thing I would also want to ask, and just for timeliness to share with everybody else here, we do have the recreational summit that's coming up and being paired in part, but we also have the a trail summit and plan. I don't know if I heard that timeline. I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that event as well.
When's the trail summit? Is there a website or something we could put in the chat for that if it hasn't already been done?
Saturday, May 30th.
Okay.
And it's at the Sequoia Conference Center. And we will also have, there are a variety of field trips to get out on existing trails and for us, even get a preview of some unopened Great Redwood Trail segments. And so that's on the Humboldt Trails Council website. Bridget just put the link in the chat, and you can sign up to RSVP for those field trips that are happening in the afternoon after the Trail Summit festivities more in the morning.
Excellent. Okay, well, being so well connected in the North Bay, North Coast area, what is the representation that you have down in the South? Where are the points of contact in Sonoma and Mendocino?
Sonoma and Marin counties?
And Marin, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so that area of the trail is managed by SMART. And so we do share
Okay.
a board member with them. The chair of our board, Supervisor Mary Sackett, is on the Board of Supervisors for Marin County. And so she's also the chair of our board, and she also sits on the SMART board. And then
Great.
at the staff level, we do meet with SMART. We coordinated really heavily with them on their signage and wayfinding plan as we were developing out what our signage was going to look like, so that there's some coordination there, and there'll continue to be a lot more coordination as we move forward, especially when we get down to the Cloverdale area where kind of their property ends and ours begins. There'll need to be close coordination there to really make that a tourism hub and a jumping off point for people to head into our northern segment.
That'll be good news for the Cloverdalians, I imagine. Okay. Any other questions or comments for Elaine and Bridget? Okay, well, seeing, hearing none, thank you for that presentation. And we'll, like I said, we'll be putting this on the project website. Next, we can turn to Sean Casey White, who is here joining us after another board meeting of some form, making presentations that I think is a common thing for trail-oriented developers and managers. And so we had the chance to talk with Sean earlier this week. She's had an impressive run down there with the Vine Trail and a project that is made big gains in a rather lengthy period of time from origin to now, but I think is seeing quite a bit of momentum and some of the later stage economic development outcomes that are, inherently part of the dream of developing these trails. And so I look forward to hearing some of that story here from Sean. And I'm gonna show your slides, Sean,
Okay.
so you can just tell me to advance if that's the best way to do it. I see you're calling in from your car office.
Yep.
So if that works for you, I can get that set up and you can make some introductory remarks.
Sure. That's great. Thanks, Josh. So Sean White, the executive director of the Napa Valley Vine Trail Coalition. I think part of my presentation today is to kind of explain. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm using my cell phone,
Yes.
so just want to make
Yes,
sure.
we
Okay.
can hear you. Yes.
So part of my presentation today will be kind of to describe the difference between the coalition and the trail and how all of these parties kind of work together. And it's a great example from what I just came from. So I just finished a presentation with the Tourism Improvement District for the city of Calistoga, which if you look at that map that's up there right now, and those logos, you can see that they're an important part of the economic development of our area. And Calistoga is the northernmost trailhead of the Vine Trail. The presentation, I've made 4 presentations to this committee. And for those of you that have been fundraisers in your life, my presentation a year ago was declined. And these are the people that we are the closest to. But I kept the faith and we kept our conversation going, and I changed the presentation over the last year to really meet their economic development needs, which was how to get more people to Calistoga and how do we capitalize on the trail that's open and how do we encourage more visitation when in fact visitation is down. And so it's an appropriate transition for me to go from that meeting. And by the way, I did successfully get the $90,000 investment from the tourism group. So that will help fund our and it'll directly benefit them as well. So it'll be the video project that we're going to do for that section of the trail that's open. We'll be able to place a new gateway at the entrance of the city that's wayfinding, as well as thank you for visiting Calistoga and how to navigate the rest of the trail as they continue on. We also are investing every time we do one of those in a pollinator garden. And it also invests in 2 fundraising events that we do that we hope will bring more visitation to the area, but also be a critical fundraiser for what we do. So that's a quick off script, but summary of what that $90,000 is investing in, and why that's important. This slide actually is another collaboration with another economic development group, which is Visit Napa Valley, which is the overarching tourism improvement group that benefits from a 2% stay tax in the county. And that specifically is to go and to continue to promote tourism within the Napa Valley. And each of the local jurisdictions get a small portion of that to then do community outreach and community development that will encourage economic development within each of the local areas. So in Napa, that's Calistoga, St. Helena, Yountville, the city of Napa, and American Canyon, and then the unincorporated Napa County. What's interesting about this slide is they created this infographic of the Napa Valley. And they did not tell me about this. And this was part of their new spring campaign. And they put the Vine Trail there as the signature, what has been called the spine, that connects our communities. And that's an important economic development look at the valley because the biggest industry in Napa is wine, and the second largest is hospitality. And so to show how the Vine Trail connects these communities and can develop those 2 economic engines is critically important in a time when visitation is down, wine consumption is down, and we have got to really figure out new ways. And we hope that the Vine Trail becomes that destination and encouragement to have more people come and visit. But I can share that later. Okay, I'll be quick. Next slide.
Is that the right one?
I haven't seen it quite yet come through on the phone. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
I won't spend any time on this. You can read this at your leisure. We do these things on our board because there's so many things going on with the Vine Trail. So this is the Vine Trail in 30 seconds. At the close of the presentation, you'll see another slide with another 30 seconds. So I've already used up the 30 seconds, so we'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay.
So this is who we are. I may be the odd woman out on this group person. Because I represent a 501c3. We are not an agent, an agency, a court, a government agency. We're not a jurisdiction. We we are simply here to accelerate and to maximize the Vine Trail vision to complete a 47-mile connection between Vallejo and Calistoga. And we were developed in 2008 after our transportation department and VTA had commissioned a Greenway study that looked at the feasibility of if a trail could actually be built in Napa. And for those of you that know Napa a little bit, what makes us unique from Sonoma is that we have the Ag Preserve, which restricts development in our area and preserves our land, particularly our rural sections, from further development, and doubles down on our commitment to agriculture. So three organizations got together to look at the feasibility study and say, can we, or how can we develop that? And so number one, they decided that we needed a 501c3 to be the catalyst, not only from a funding standpoint, but also for a consistency and a catalyst to make sure this stayed on point. But the other reason was our values. And I think those are an important component. And some people are surprised when they hear this, that number one, that everything with this trail was going to be voluntary. That meant that no land that needed to be taken would be done by eminent domain, and that it would be collaborated and the landowners would be engaged with that. Number two, that it would follow a transportation corridor, either the railroad or the highway. Number three, that no vineyard or vine would be taken out of production. And last, that maintenance, that the trail would be maintained and that the coalition would support the trail so that it remained beautiful. As our founder would say, like the wine that is produced in Napa Valley. And those values have continued with us since our founding in September of 2028. And so next slide. These are really, so that conversation with the Napa Valley vintners, the grape growers, and the land trusts, those were our founders, that discussed then that we needed all of these other economic interests and land interests and government agencies all to be a part of this coalition. And our project managers, depending on which project or section we've talked about, are led by the city or the county, depending on the jurisdiction. That's not the role that we serve. We are the support. I feel like I'm the right hand of Napa County or the city of Napa or the city of Calistoga for that matter. And hopefully, they feel that the volunteers and the financial support and so forth that we provide is, a match to the work that this is. But we have 38 represented organizations, and they all are stakeholders in this. And I think that has elevated the Vine Trail. 15 years and building 3 sections, I think is a good achievement, particularly when other projects may take even longer. And I think that it's this stakeholder group that has really been a part of that. Next slide. There we go. So our functions as the nonprofit, we have 4 of them. One is we act as the accelerant. I spent 30 years before I came to the Vine Trail in healthcare and fundraising for a national healthcare organization. And we talked about accelerating, funding and what was important to get to, the final result. So we are the accelerant that supports and so that people don't lose sight of the Vine Trail. So we do the early funding for the surveys, early funding for some of the environmental work. We may even get private funding like we did with the most recent section to complete the 35% alignment design before we're able to get federal funding that started the formal environmental work and engineering for the project. So that seed money is one of the things that we start with. Number two is that we represent the landowners. Our first section that we built in 2014 and opened in 2016 was mostly on public land or the railroad right-of-way, which is a private railroad, the wine train. But in this new section that we opened in Calistoga to St. Helena that I'm looking at right now out of my car, we worked with 15 landowners to not only to give right-of-way and give easements, but of the 15, 13 of them donated their easements. Only 2 requested compensation, an assessment and compensation. So it's that early collaboration and engagement with the landowners that the government agencies wouldn't be able to do until after CEQA and NEPA are filed. We're able to have those conversations early on and make sure that it's a collaborative process. And then we provide the 25% match. So the other thing that we do is we work with the local community stakeholders and other funders, and we fundraise to be a support and 25% match. I think on the last project, comparatively to the other jurisdictions, the coalition, I like to say the community members, provided 52% of the match for the project. And that included everything from the early survey all the way up to final construction and right-of-way and some contingency construction funding that we're still paying for since the trail opened a year and a half ago. And number 4, and this goes back to our values, that we provide 50% of the maintenance. So we are the steward of the trail. And so again, we fundraise for the community support. And an example of this is the work that we're doing in Vallejo. There have been trails that have been built in the city of Vallejo that are not necessarily utilized. I think that our commitment to fund maintenance and to have a maintenance committee that engages all of the public works directors that are leading maintenance together to collaborate, and then adding in the volunteer component has brought such a pride and responsibility in the area in Vallejo that we now have seen use continue to grow and grow. And it's been a really exciting opportunity to see that take off. Okay, I will be much quicker on the next few slides. So this again is for your own information. This is a history of the 15 years, starting from how we developed from the idea of the Greenway study to the development of the coalition and that's the 501c3 to our first grant from one of our founders. That was the seed money for construction that led to the Oak Knoll section build that connected Napa to Yountville. And then you can read some of the rest of the anecdotes and landmark achievements that we've been able to move forward on. Next slide. This is not to be a complete side of our budget. It's actually larger than this, but this is just to show you a snapshot of what we've invested in from community fundraising. We don't accept, even though we write the government grants for the county, that's the other role that we play, is that I'm the lead grant writer for the ATP Cycle 8 and the SF4A or the our congressional community programs appropriation grants, all of those I'm the lead writer with. And then I work for a day with our county or public works senior engineer and to apply for those because he is the project manager and the steward of those funds. And so, but this is our budget and how we were able to support those peaks when we were in construction or ongoing in maintenance. Next slide. We are driven by a strategic plan, and so we track that. We have a 5-year plan that we approved in 2023. That'll take us to 28. We break that down every year into strategic objectives for the year. And just to illustrate again so that there's no confusion, this is just for our work as a nonprofit. This is not encompassing everything within the county as part of this project or that. It's just, again, going back to our 4 key roles that we play in making sure that this is an investment and a value add for the community. Next slide. So that is my contact information. I didn't mean to just shoot over those. So if you have questions, I could happily add those. I have additional slides later on that if you want to see more of the ongoing work, if you want to see the before and afters of maintenance and all of the sagas of what happens after construction and what investments and things that, you know, we have to continue with. I think I also included some additional work on the communications. We serve as another function as the communication and the activation and education of the trail now. We have 8 standing volunteer committees that make up each of those groups and activities that enhance the trail. And again, we hope continue to add value to our stakeholders and partners. You know, if I look tired right now, it's because I think I dream right now SS4A and ATP. So,
No, that was great. That was great. Thank you, Sean. And we will put the full slide deck, which has about 7 or 8 more slides on it, along with the presentation on the website. And before opening it up for questions and comments from the group, it occurred to me that you know, we heard from Elaine and Bridget earlier, who, you know, are leading this Great Redwood Trail Agency, which is a public agency, you know, shepherding this very large infrastructure project on existing right of way that is now owned by the agency. And it is distinct from the experience of the Vine Trail and your role as a 501c3 and the functions that you have. But I think there's a number of really valuable insights for this group, kind of from those contrasting kind of organizational types. And so a few that occurred to me were, as you stated, you know, the value of the nonprofit being able to take on this catalytic role between the landowners and do the fundraising and play all of those roles, which you know, may be a little trickier from an agency perspective. That's one thing. Another thing that occurred to me was, you know, the Great Redwood Trail has a right of way and it's on a, you know, this rail line, but there's all these communities that are going to be touched by the trail that will have an opportunity to create their own little vine trail or their own little, you know, whatever it may be. And it will require a different type of organization to make that happen. You know, the Great Redwood Trail Agency could be a partner, but it won't necessarily take on building the Lolita Express, the Lolita Trail or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So I
Right.
think that there's some interesting discussion topics in all of that. And if not just for me, I think I'll quiet down and see what else others may have. Besides Thomas's laughing comment at my Lolita
No, but
comment. But
I would agree with you. I would say that, I don't know if this is a exactly parallel comment, but I've found that we had 15 landowners that we negotiated easements with, but we've ended up really working with over 30 plus landowners, because the trail isn't about just what's in the 14 feet of, ours is a class 1 trail, with varying pavements and trail surfaces and you know wayfinding and intersections and commercial driveways, vineyard driveways. I think, and I've actually participated in a few calls with the Redwood Trail specifically about our Ag Respect initiative. That was a development of one from our founder from the Farm Bureau and the Vine Trail, because we knew that we would be working with these 14, and I'm working with now, I have to count in my head because it changes, but 56 landowners for the last 2 sections. I think we just waited for the biggest one for the last 11 miles. But I'm happy to say that we have 99% approval, and I expect 95% of those easements to be donated. But Ag Respect was a big outgrowth of that, because we knew that we needed to be able to communicate with trail users what it was like to be alongside working farms. We also realized, though, to your point, that there were all these neighbors that were impacted. So if you live on one street that the trail crosses, you have to think about that tractor that has to go through from that vineyard after a harvest and take that road. And how do I cross a trail when there's cyclists and pedestrians walking the street? I'm not used to seeing that. Or what do I do when this happens? Every imaginable question you can think of has happened. Or another big one is drainage. So what happens when you build a trail and you impact culverts, or you haven't necessarily thought it all the way through about how it impacts not just the landowner but the adjacent landowner? Or because, oh, guess what, water travels to the river, and the river's on the other side of the trail. So, and didn't we have environmental reports that looked at all that? Well, it did, but it only looked in the project area, right? So yada yada yada. I'm telling a story that all of you have experienced before, but it is about the whole neighborhood of everybody that's a part of the trail.
indeed, Bridget shaking her head. I could see that. Kathy, do you have something? You're off mute.
No.
You're just observing. Bridget, did you have something?
Yeah, I think one thing that we're really excited about is actually correcting a lot of those issues that the railroad potentially created with a lot of adjacent landowners that they, didn't really take into consideration at that point of time when you're talking about drainage and fish passages and like those different studies. We have the unique set that already the railroad pathway exists, so they already had a lot of drainage, but a lot of it hasn't been very advantageous to the adjacent landowners. So we are able to, as we go through and do the planning and building out the trail, make adjustments to correct a lot of that, which has been pretty exciting. I really appreciate the comments about like how do we get our tractors across this trail and what kind of use? And those are a lot of the questions we're getting from adjacent working landowners. And the opportunity from these trails or having organizations like this too is that we are able to apply for other funding sources and grant sources that can have positive impacts beyond our trail scope. But because we are like an organizing agency, we can do things like apply for state funding for fire mitigation along the corridor and adjacent landowners. So we really look at this as a tool, or hoping to communicate that this is also a tool to greater the impact to the communities beyond what they might be able to individually do in that model that the Vine Trail has done. And we've definitely learned a lot from their work that they've done, and we're very excited to bring those positive impacts to the places that we're passing through.
Well, if you can help us on the other side, figure out how to find additional funding sources as well. You know, I feel like my head has been down so much on the construction component and building towards those links that you I've been a professional fundraiser. Oops.
We can hear you.
Oh, sorry, I just lost video there for a second. So that we could use a lot of input and direction from you because I think there are more funding opportunities that we're not tapping into. You know, what I have come to find out in my professional career in doing this work, which I considered my retirement job, is I so admire all of you that do this, you know, in public works, working for agencies, and the hard work of advocating for this. It doesn't happen overnight, and so it is definitely something that takes years and a lot of dedication to make a reality.
Yeah, indeed. Many years. Infrastructure projects, especially trail projects, are many year visions. One other thing that you mentioned, Sean, that I caught my ear was and I'm just thinking about this kind of from the perspective of along the Great Redwood Trail, the 29 cities or the communities, even um, unincorporated communities in some of the more rural areas, but the business improvement district as a vehicle for aligning for fundraising and aligning trail oriented activities for tourism related things. So that's another vehicle for economic development fundraising and
And
funding, I would say, versus financing. But go ahead, please.
it's true that it does in some ways, and then in other ways, it's like one you have to also combat the other side of it. It's like once it's built, well, it's already there. What else do we have to do? And so it's the education part that once it's built, how do you maintain it? How do you make sure it's safe? How are we communicating to get people on it and using it? And how do you educate folks, you know, about what it takes to collaborate and how do you maximize that, you know, as a resource? So it's a work in progress that you're always talking about and being relevant. And to the comment I just made, it's not something that agencies typically do, right? So agencies are not, you know, the public works directors are not out at chamber mixers or, you know, going to hotel openings or things like that. And, you know, listening or have the time to do any of that. So just like with ag respect, you know, so you know, it's about what I think, again, what we've been able to do is act as a hub to bring those folks together, even between the ag commissioner and the county and the ag commissioner and the hotels or whatever strange crossover we can create. Those are other opportunities that I think we hopefully bring people together, even cross county. The fact that Vallejo and Solano, you know, are working together on this is another way that collaboration can help.
I wonder if the Great Redwood Trail process agency has considered the formation of a 501c3 to serve some of these functions that is that something, Bridget, that's in your guys' radar, or what's your comments on that?
We would love to have one officially. At this time, we have the Friends of Annie and Mary, which is a 501c3 that's more specific to the trail segment in the Annie and Mary spur from Arcata to Blue Lake. But they have been able to assist us with some of the needs that we are restricted through being a public agency. But yeah, we would like to have a greater 501c3 created. We don't personally at the time have the bandwidth for that, so we are
Yeah.
looking for active community engagements to hopefully create something larger because we do have people that are doing their estate planning and want to leave us funds or things like that. We don't have a way to capture some of that at this time, so we feel that that will really help us grow in the future once we have that.
Yeah.
I'll just caution you a little bit is that it sounds like a great idea, right? The 501c3. But there are so many other components to it, right? So as you grow, there's obligations and, operations, and there's only two people that work full-time for the Vine Trail Coalition. So it's not the overhead as much as it is just the organizational work. And particularly getting it started. Our founder, Chuck McMinn, served both as the board president and the chair of the programs committee for the Napa Valley Vintners and the and president of the board for the first 8 years. And that's a Herculean effort. Oh, and by the way, he also ran a winery, so and so it takes a different person with an incredible vision to put that together. And I have all of the respect in the world for him and what he's done. I would also say that the strong tenets about the maintenance and the funding agreements. So we go into funding agreements with each agency, with each jurisdiction. So we have 7 contracts right now for maintenance, and we have 4 funding agreements for construction. So those hold us accountable to the deliverables that we have to the agencies. Some nonprofits or 501c3s aren't quite ready for that. And sometimes I stress about that too, about, our ability to be able to deliver on our agreements. So, I would, and I've seen others. I've participated with Bay Area Trails Collaborative and the Bay Trail. I've been on the board before the merger with Save the Bay. And, not all nonprofits have the same vision and focus and directive that has the funding agreement commitments to the agencies in quite the same way. It puts us out on a limb a little bit, but it can make for some exciting times ahead. But it's why when I was in there across the way that I got emotional and I said, I'm committed. I make Graham, my counterpart at the county, a little nervous because I say, Graham, we have to be breaking ground by 2028 and we've got to finish this trail by 2030. This is not a make-believe goal. We're focused. We got to get it done. So
Yeah. Cautionary note, you need somebody with conviction and a bunch of other things to make it work. And there's some strategic considerations on the finance side, which I think, would be important to get deep into. And I just invite Calder Johnson here, calling him off the bench because he's been our leader in the arts, culture, and tourism sector of this last few years. And Calder, I just invite you to offer any thoughts you have on these topics of the day.
Gosh, I mean, a lot. I can thank you, Elaine, so much for that wonderful presentation. Bridget, good to see you. Sean, good to virtually meet you. Really exciting to see what's happening down there. I mean, that definitely struck what you were saying about wineries was absolutely like on point with a lot of things that I've encountered talking with vintners in Mendocino County. I mean, certainly there's a tremendous need to be agile in the industry, and really, I think agile in the entire industry of tourism, travel, all of these things, because I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed for us, particularly in this region over the last decade or so. And I think that I mean it's really good to see projects like the GRTA happening, because we need to keep developing new possibilities. We need to keep growing and expanding and just adapting. So I think that that's really important. And also, gosh, other thoughts I would say too that I mean to the point like also the point that you raised earlier, Josh, about potential of like 501(c)(3)s, or I heard the word T-bids thrown around there as well. I think that there is a lot of, but I mean, it's a heavy lift, but there is a lot of momentum, I think, happening right now in terms of regional ground up development like that, that wouldn't could mean that it necessarily wouldn't even like that like something like the GRT wouldn't even be having to go it alone. But in fact, that there is I mean, I think I can give another example where there was a lot of tourism related activity historically around the Redwood Highway 101. And now I think about like Route 66 having their centennial. And, I mean, California Route 66 has an entire 501(c)(3) devoted to just that chunk of highway, saying like we just for purposes of tourism development. And I'm like, okay, well, gosh, I mean, it feels like there's a whole sort of big regional vision that could be articulated at some point. But these are also just things that I think about in the shower. So,
Yeah.
But
Well, I
what you're
think
saying,
they're
can I just add something
oh,
to what
yeah.
you're saying is that what I kept hearing over and over again was stakeholders, stakeholders, stakeholders. Um, it's we've I think there's opportunity before we talk about 501(c)(3) and all the complications that come with it. I think getting together those groups that you just mentioned as stakeholders and saying, what can each of these stakeholders contribute to the bigger vision of the Redwood Trail and make them a part of it, bring them in and make them a part of it. I don't know what that looks like exactly, but I know that that's why economic development councils, function, right? It's like, so I wonder if there's room to start with by bringing those stakeholders together and, and, um, and make them part of the solution. Get them excited about being it and give them a little stake in it. Make them accountable for bringing something to the table.
hmm. Yeah, it's a big tent. We can make a very big tent.
Yeah,
There's a
you
lot
can
going. There's a lot
absolutely.
going on in this neck of the woods. That I get excited about.
Well, I think it's particularly timely with all the discussion of the sustainability committee and all of that work, the post jobs first world, and it's not going to be a simple, smooth, as it has been. And well, I wouldn't even say it's been simple or smooth, but there wouldn't be a defined sort of programmatic and funding thing necessarily. But I think one of the reasons that I was so interested in making sure that there was this conversation here in this working group with the focus on the Great Redwood Trail and lessons from trail development is that this is a ongoing established durable uh cross jurisdictional major infrastructure project that's going to be going on for decades on the North Coast. And then it will persist as a, operation and maintenance thing. And it'll be a resource around which communities can organize to the point, to the economic benefit. And so I think that having that in mind and then like John says, bring groups together and help, form a coalition of interest and seeing if that leads to the definition of, yeah, the right move is, a 501c3 to take on these certain functions and to receive all these gifts that Bridget and Elaine are getting thrown at their feet and put them to work on behalf of the trail and to advise different communities around the trail on what's worked over here versus over there and kind of build up these intellectual and organizational infrastructure that could really bring to life that economic opportunity in these rural areas over the next 30 years. And that's what's, really so exciting about the Redwood Trails. It's, they own the property, they've got a pretty good start on the funding. Is, I think the only thing that would be better if, well, some of that offshore wind movement hadn't slowed down so much, and then there'd be a bright kind of economic future blooming up in the far north again. But this can be one of them, and I think it's a real tremendous opportunity not to be missed. Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted to tie the knot here a little bit before we close for the day and to your aforementioned sustainability committee efforts that are transpiring and to have their final meeting next week as a conclusion among the activities with the committee members, not necessarily all of which is with Elizabeth. My question is for our convening partners, if we're making this some part of a actual part of a working group, as is always, what is this next step then as we're concluding that work and seeing that we're getting some direction of a framework and a model among what could be selected, kind of a decision tree, it looks like what Elizabeth has come up with, and a framework of understanding of what we have been operating in as an environment. Is there an opportunity for us to create time and space in this group, given among the projects, from what was just presented all the way to those that weren't funded in our efforts? And I was just curious if that was a part of our plan development with your services.
Calder, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, I mean, I know that, like, as Thomas, you said, I mean, it's definitely the question of the day. And I was just having a lot of I've been having a lot of conversations about this, including like this morning, what have you. But because I also get easily distracted too. Andy, I didn't realize you were on the call until you were like chiming in the chat. So good to see you. Good friends from MLTPA all the way out in Eastern Sierra, which I know sounded like I just got a bit of ADD there, but the point I was actually making to that was that Andy is one of our good pals from out in Eastern Sierra. One of the amazing things that came out
Okay.
of this process was
Right.
the ability not just for regions to collaborate within themselves, but for us to start being able to reach out to each other across the vast distance of California, right? I mean, like
So
this
the MLTPA is
Mammoth Lakes Public Trails Association. Did I get that
this is
correct, Andy?
I'll jump in. Yes, the Mammoth Lakes Trails and Public Access Foundation, and
I
we're
almost got it. Yeah,
the industry
almost.
sector coordinator for sustainable rec and tourism specific to the Sierra region.
fantastic. Yeah. And so John Wentworth, right? He's part of
Yep.
your group?
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
And
Okay.
and to that point, I mean, like, I think like those are such important questions you're bringing up, Thomas. And I mean, I hope we're just all coming loud and clear and with some vision in our hearts and our eyes when we're having more of the meetings with the sustainability group. And I'm just speaking entirely personally for myself. Like that's it right now. Because I mean, you asked me my thought, Josh, when I was like, looked like you're thinking about something. Is that I mean, for me, I have seen so much come out of this work already in terms of, again, the collaboration, the connectivity, particularly not just between our own region, but also amongst the entire state, that I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep the work rolling, figure it out, and sometimes maybe I was joking. I think this is sometimes maybe my own tendency coming out of the arts and culture nonprofit world is sometimes you just get really passionate about something and you figure out the money as you go.
Yeah,
It's like
that's why I was so eager to pivot from the comments about a enthusiastic person with all that kind of what you have just demonstrated. This topic of something to go along with the Great Redwood Trail. I think there's an opportunity that we shouldn't miss there. That there should be something in addition to the agency that is considered, and I would put that into this sustainability conversation as one of the strong opportunities that's in front of us. And so with enthusiasm like that, Calder, we can maybe go somewhere. Bridget.
Yeah, I guess the question is kind of like, what can communities do, right? If they really want to spearhead, they want to get segments built, like what is the next steps? How can you go from maybe a tier 2 or 3 to a tier 1? Because our tier status that we've created and posted is based on, and how we've done the project prioritization is based on, a moment in time, and those moments in time change. So part of that could look like spearheading an organization and organizing lead agencies. So our agency, we are small, so we have a certain amount of capacity to actually take on organizing contractors and managing different grants. So we have utilized cities like City of Arcata, City of Eureka, City of Ukiah, City of Willits, where their public works department is basically taking on kind of the project management aspect of it, and we're utilizing some of our funding sources so that we have to get that segment built in and of itself. So if there's colleges or public works, if there's areas that can come to us and say, hey, we want to help get this segment built, we have things like, we have on-call grant writers that we can assist with to help us get additional funding. It's a grant, so it's always up in the air, but there's ways that make a trail segment more feasible for us to attack, because we only have the bandwidth to manage so many projects at one time. So that is something that if there's like a community or organizations that can help figure out whether or not they have the capacity to help us build or manage a project, that is one way.
By the way,
So-
can the Vine Trail be adopted by this so that we could get help with grant writing? I just want to know if that's an option.
We
You
would
have
love
to
to connect you. Let's find a way.
Yeah, you have to run all the way up through Alexander Valley and Knights Valley.
So
I could.
I-
I might take you up.
Yeah.
I love the resources so I'm just a little envious.
Yeah, I feel bad in comparison. I don't want to take away from all the work and efforts that have gone on, but we have been through this legislation and our trail being created, been given some initial resources that a lot of other trails don't have. And I do think it's an important flow of revenue and investment from the state to our region, because our region doesn't typically get a lot of investments just because of our being a lot smaller population centers. So this is really a great opportunity for us to diversify the economic drivers we have for this region. So that is a huge benefit to us. And so that's kind of why, how can we use that kind of funding to capitalize and grow even more additional funding coming in beyond what those initial allocations were. So
And I think by actually deploying your capacity in a way that leverages that and makes and finds other money on top of that, that is a mechanism to do that. And I think it's a direct line into this question of, sustaining this momentum, even with the jobs first dollars, disappearing. It's gotta, there's got to be the thinking about how to connect with other agencies and including the Great Redwood Trail, but all these other ones too, the air, the water, the fire, all those places have agencies and dollars that are relevant here. So I see that we're getting very close to the end, and we could go on and on. I think we will next week, Thomas, in that sustainability thing. But also at the June 3rd through the 5th outdoor recreation meeting, and the subject, I think you guys have something on May 30th, the trail day that you mentioned up north, and all the other various venues. But
Yeah, I did want to pop in here then, Josh,
sure.
to the larger topic that I'm expressing into Bridget's extension of solution and coalition building, as well as Sean's example, real life of what's going on separate in a different segment, is that this is, I guess, unofficial, official ask to the Great Redwood Trail to join this coalition with us within Redwood Region RRRISE and the continuation of our efforts. Bridget, I shared with you a little bit recently about what RRRISE is to me and to further that development of our community, but having official partnerships and MOUs created as we work with our partners at CCRP through the end of this year, and some extension components that we're hearing about being offered from the governor's office and some coordination. We would love to have you all as the one of those official partners as we gain momentum and craft MOUs outside the post California Jobs First funding initial phase.
I think that's a great comment, just as the observer of all of this. That's a great way to summarize this meeting, is that it starts with those MOUs and those agreements, and you can do so much in establishing coalitions and MOUs. It's just mentioned, that a lot of your project work is getting done at the public works director level, as the lead implementers. Those are going to be vital to continue and to continue maintenance and the support of it. And so starting with those MOUs the way you've described is a perfect.
Thanks, Sean.
Excellent. Well, that was a very fitting conclusion to our meeting today. Thank you all for making the time. Lee, did you have something? I saw you came on, and did you want to say anything? You're just happy to be here with us. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the next room when we have the chance. Thank you, Andy, for joining us from Mammoth Lakes. Give our regards to John, and wish you all the best.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.